Greetings, YouTube! The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And we have another chapter of our Weapon Mastery review and grading series. Today, we are going to be talking about the Topple Weapon Masteries. And we are going to be talking about what it is, what weapons it goes with, what feats are good with it, what classes work well with it, and then finally, what species/races are going to go well with it too. And probably in a later video, we'll do a Topple build for all of you. All right, so lots to go through, lots to go over. Don't go anywhere, and stay tuned. All right, before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you like this video. Hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or comment. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. Don't forget to share this video. And on the screen right here and in the links below, I have two of my adventures that I've written. Vault of the Worm for 3rd level characters, Painted Rock for 4th level characters. They are found at Dungeon Masters Guild. Check them out. All right, let's get into it. I've got my notes here, so we're going to be going over that. You're going to see me looking down every once in a while at my notes, but here it is, Topple. And Topple says, if you hit a creature with this weapon, so that's a weapon that has the Topple Mastery, and you are able to use the Mastery with, you can force the creature to make a Constitution saving throw. Now, out of all the saving throws, the worst one that you want a creature to make is a Strength one. That is, that has the least benefit or advantage to you as a player. The second one in that list is Constitution. The worst one for the creature, which gives you the most benefit, is an Intelligence saving throw, followed by a Charisma saving throw. So just to kind of put that in perspective, but if you hit a creature with a weapon that has Topple, you force it to make a con save, which is DC 8 plus the ability modifier used to make the attack roll and your proficiency bonus. Most of these weapons are going to be strength. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. Now, what I want to point out with this, and this is the objective with prone, you want to pair prone up with things that will slow the creature down or bring their speed to 0. Because if a creature is prone, they have to use half of their movement to stand up. And if you could slow them down, then they lose a bunch of movement. And they use most of it to stand up. And if their speed goes to 0, they can't actually stand up. So that is the objective with this particular weapon mastery and any build that you make that is centered around Topple. All right, so that is what Topple is. Let's go ahead and give it a grade while we're here. I like this kind of thing. We're going to give this one an A-. It's not as good, I think, as Slow, but it is almost there, and it is not as good as Push, which you know I love forced movement, and Nick also is pretty great too. So Topple is right up there. We're giving it an A-. All right, so let's talk about the weapons, and I'm going to be looking down at my notes here. Let's talk about the weapons that we can use with Topple. And the first one on our list here is the Quarterstaff. It is a versatile weapon. It does bludgeoning damage. So a lot of the feats that we're going to pair up with the Topple Weapon Mastery depend on the weapon that you're using and the type of damage that it does. So with the Quarterstaff, we're going to want to pair those up with feats that are either going to slow things down, like I mentioned before, or things that are going to pair up with the bludgeoning, like Crusher. So here it is. It's versatile. So it normally does a D6 bludgeoning damage. If you use 2 hands, it does a D8. Not that big a deal. Versatile. Out of all the weapon properties is probably the weakest. And then, of course, it has Topple. All right, so the next is, now that is the only simple weapon that has Topple. So the next one that we're going to go to is the Battle Axe. This is the only one that does slashing damage. So again, we want to pair that up with a feat that does slashing damage. It is also versatile, so it does a D8 slashing damage. If you use two hands, it does a D10, and it has topple. The only reason I would take the battle axe is if I am pairing it up with a feat. Otherwise, I would take a different weapon. All right, the next weapon that we have is the maul. Does 2d6 bludgeoning damage, so keep in mind, feats that pair with bludgeoning. It is heavy, and which means you have to have a minimum strength score, and it is two-handed, which means you have to use two hands. So you won't be using this with a shield, and it has topple, but there are a bunch of feats that we can pair with this in addition to it doing bludgeoning damage because it is heavy and two-handed. The next one, which is going to be my favorite one out of this, is going to be the lance, and I know I did those out of alphabetical order, and that's okay. So the lance does 1d10 piercing damage. It is heavy, reach, and two-handed, so that gives us more options for feats, and it has topple. And I love the lance, especially if you are mounted. Knights that are mounted that have a lance are nasty and disgusting. All right, and then the last weapon that we have out of this is the trident, which does a D8 piercing. You can throw it, range of 20, 60, and it's versatile, which means if you use two hands, it does a D10. That is literally like going from 4.5 damage to 5.5 damage. It's like a +1, that's it. And it also has topple, but it has piercing, so there are things that you can do with that as well. Again, feats pair with damage type because there are specific feats that connect to certain damage types. Okay, so those are the weapons out of here. Again, my favorite weapon out of all of this is going to be the lance. All right, now let's talk about feats and fighting styles that go along with the Topple or complement the Topple Weapon Mastery. So the first one we're going to talk about is Charger. And let's get all the way down to that one. There's a bunch of new feats that popped up in here because of the Heroes of Faerun, because there's a bunch of feats in there. Okay, Charger. It is a feat, so you have to be 4th level. There is a strength or dex requirement. It gives you a bump to strength or dexterity. It says when you take the dash action, your speed increases by 10 feet. Almost no one is going to use that part of this feat. No one is going to be taking the dash action on this unless they're a rogue or some other kind of class combination that gets dash as a bonus action. But that says dash action. So, there's some arguments to be made with that. Now, the second part of this is the one that is going to be used and is the most beneficial. So, if you move at least 10 feet in a straight line towards a target immediately before hitting it with a melee attack as part of the attack action, choose one of the following. You either do an extra D8 damage or, which is the most important part of this, you push the target up to 10 feet away if it is no more than one size larger than you. And then you can only do this once per turn. Again, a knight with a lance that charges 10 feet, hits the thing with the attack action with that lance, pushes it back 10 feet, and then could knock it prone with the topple. So now it's got to stand up and use half of its movement to stand up, and then it's got to move 10 feet further to get close to that particular opponent. So these are the kinds of interactions that I am talking about that go together. All right, the next feat that we have, and that one isn't necessarily procced to any particular one type of weapon. This next feat is Crusher. Crusher is a feat, so you have to be 4th level. You get a bump to strength or con. And once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, so remember we had a couple of weapons that did bludgeoning damage. The quarterstaff, the maul, those were the two. And so when you hit and you do bludgeoning damage, you can move it 5 feet to an unoccupied space if it's no more than one size larger than you. So, again, we hit it, we knock it back prone if it fails that saving throw with those weapons, and then it's got to use half of its action to stand up, and then it's got to go an extra 5 feet to get near us. Also, as a bonus, if you crit hit with that weapon, then attacks have advantage. But if you knock it prone, they're going to have advantage anyway. All right, the next is a style, and this is going to be great weapon fighting all the way down. There's so many new things that got put in here. Here's great weapon fighting, and it is a style. So when you roll damage for an attack you make with a melee weapon that you are holding with 2 hands, so it's got to be 2. So that could be, now this is where that versatile comes in. So that could be the quarterstaff, that could be the battle axe, it could be the lance, but more than likely it's not going to be the lance, because if you're mounted you might have a shield. And it's definitely going to be the maul, and it could be the trident. So when you roll damage for an attack with a melee weapon you are using with 2 hands, you can treat any 1 or 2 on the damage die as a 3. And the weapon must have the 2-handed or versatile property. So that was pretty much all of our weapons that we talked about. So that's a pretty good fighting style that you can use if you get fighting styles. All right, the next one is Great Weapon Master, and this can only be used with certain weapons in our list. So you get a bump to strength only this time. When you hit a creature with a weapon that has the heavy property, so that's going to be our maul and our lance. That's it. And so heavy property, as part of the attack action, you can cause the weapon to deal extra damage, and the extra damage is equal to your proficiency bonus. Immediately after you score a critical hit with a melee weapon or reduce a creature to 0 hit points, you can make 1 attack with the same weapon as a bonus action. Now, that is not going to work if you really push them back, so you need to be cognizant of that. But this is a pretty good feat with the lance and the maul themselves. All right, so the next feat we're going to talk about is Mage Slayer. This doesn't necessarily go along with any of the topple. It's just good to have with fighters. I normally take it because the fighters do get a bunch of feats or feat choices. I take this later on, and it lets you kind of be tanky against spellcasters. Okay, the next one obviously on this list is going to be Mounted Combat. Okay, so it's a feat, so you got to be level 4. You get a bump to Strength, Dex, or Wisdom, and you get this Mounted Strike. While mounted, you have advantage on attack rolls against an unmounted creature within 5 feet of your mount that is at least 1 size smaller than the mount. And your mounts are normally large, so you're going to have advantage on a lot of attacks. And then there's some defensive options with this, with Leap Aside for area of effect damage and for Veer to stop things from attacking your mount. Now, the great thing about this is this goes, essentially this goes well with any of these weapons, but the lance particularly, because you can hold the lance with 1 hand and hold the shield in the other hand. But it can go well with any of them because you could be on a mount with any of these weapons and you get advantage, which is awesome. All right, the next one is Piercer, and this one, again, is one of these that is proc to a specific type of damage. So it's a feat. You get a bump to Strength or Dex. Once per turn when you hit a creature with an attack that pierces. So we've got the Trident and the Lance. You can re-roll the attack's damage, and you must use the new roll. When you score a critical hit with that deals piercing damage to a creature, you can roll 1 additional die when determining the extra piercing damage. So some pretty good feats if you want to get a little bit of extra damage with that. The next one we've got is Pole Arm Master, and this one works with a lot of the weapons within here. So it's a feat. You got to have a Strength or Dex 13 or better. It's a bump to Strength or Dex. So when you take the attack action with a quarterstaff, so that was on our list, or a weapon that has heavy and reach property. The Lance is heavy and reach. So you can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with the opposite end of the weapon. So you can hit something with the lance as you're charging it down, and then you can turn around and hit it. Now you got to be careful to not push them too far away. But you have reach, so if you may be able to do that. The weapon deals bludgeoning damage, and the weapon's damage die for this is a D4. You could have piercing, and you could have crusher with this as well. And they would both work on the lance. Piercer would let you, on the initial attack, would let you re-roll some damage. And then if you hit them with the other end of the lance, then they could be struck back. Got reactive strike as well. So while you're holding a quarterstaff spear or a weapon that has heavy and reach, the lance, you can take a reaction to make 1 melee attack against a creature. that enters the reach you have with the weapon. So there you go. Okay, the next one is Savage Attacker. This is an origin feat, and this is just good because it lets you re-roll some damage. That's to get some better damage. Sentinel is another one that we have on this, and this goes well with the Topple because it has a chance of lowering the speed to 0. So it's a feat. You have to have a strength or dex of 13 or better. You get a bump to strength or dex. So immediately after a creature within 5 feet of you takes the disengage action or hits a target other than you with an attack, you can make an opportunity attack against that creature. When you hit the creature with this opportunity attack or an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0. So if you hit the creature with an opportunity attack and you knock it prone, its speed becomes 0 for the rest of the current turn, meaning it cannot stand up. That is awesome. And this is a go-to feat for the Topple. The next feat we have is Shield Master, and I just put this out there because a lot of these builds are going to have shields. So feat, you have to have shield training, which means you have to be able to use a shield, and you increase your strength. If you attack a creature within 5 feet of you as part of the attack action and you hit with a melee weapon, you can immediately bash the target with your shield, forcing the creature to make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, it's either pushed or knocked prone. So the great thing about this is if you hit, let's say you hit them with the lance and you fail to knock them prone with Topple, you can do it again with the shield. And then you get the interposing shield as well, which is great. Next one we have is Slasher. This only works for certain things. And it's a general feat. So once per turn when you hit a creature with a slashing damage, which is our battle axe, you can reduce their speed by 10 feet. So again, you topple them with the battle axe and then their speed is reduced. So if they go from a 30 to a 20, if they try to stand up, they only have 10 feet of movement left, which is great. And then there is disadvantage on attack rolls if you crit them. And the last feat that I have in here is Strike of the Giants. And I like this one particularly because of the frost portion of this. So when you take this feat, choose one of the benefits below. Once per turn when you hit a target with a melee weapon or ranged weapon attack using thrown weapon, trident, you can imbue the attack with the additional effect depending on the benefit. So with Frost Giant, you do some extra damage and you force it to make a Constitution save, or its speed is reduced to 0 until the start of your next turn. So you hit it, you can topple it, and then its speed goes to 0, meaning it cannot stand up. And the DC for this is that, and you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. This is a awesome one, and it goes very well with one of the choices of species/race that we're going to talk about. So let's talk about that next. All right, let's get into which species I think are good for this. The first one we've got on our list, of course, is one of my favorite ones in D&D 2024, and that is the Goliath because of the versatility and the choices that you get with this. They've got a speed of 35 feet. You can't go wrong with that. And then they have this Giant's Ancestry. So the one that I would like with this to build for a Topple is the Frost Giant one, and that is the only one out of here that I like. So when all the rest of them, you can do some extra damage, and there's a kind of some panic buttons with one. The Hill Giants Tumble, that one I would do if you fail to knock them prone with Topple. Then maybe you could use that one to also put the prone condition on, but Frost's Chill is a really good one. So when you hit the target with an attack, you deal damage to it. You can also do some cold damage, and you reduce their speed by 10 feet. Plus, if you hit them with a Topple weapon, they are toppled. So we get this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, and then we get all of them after a long rest. So let's say we hit with the lance, we do some extra damage, we topple them, and their speed is reduced by 10 feet. That's it. So now their speed went from 30 to 20. On their turn when they try to stand up, they have 10 feet of movement left. Very, very awesome. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about, and there's not very many of these, is the Orc. Not sure I really like what 2024 has done with the Orc. I have a video about how orcs are evil, and this still should be the half-orc, but it is what it is. The reason I picked this is because of Adrenaline Rush. There are a few orc feats that are good that go along with this, but primarily this one is for this one. So you can take the dash action as a bonus action. When you do so, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. That's pretty good. And then you have Relentless Endurance too. So that one's also pretty good. It's not as good as the Goliath though, not even close. And then we've got the Eladrin right here. And I like these because there's a few things in here that are very controlling. So, first off, we've got Fey Step, and that's the main one. And there's two things that go along with the Fey Step. So as a bonus action, you can magically teleport 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. When you reach 3rd level, the Fey Step gains an additional effect, which has a proficiency bonus. Now, the only thing wrong with this is a lot of these are martial melee fighting classes, and they're not going to have very strong intelligence, wisdom, or charisma modifiers. But some of these are very good. So, Winter, when you Fey Step, a creature of your choice within 5 feet can be frightened. That's bad if they get that, especially if you topple them, because they can't move closer to you. And then the other one that I like here is Spring. When you use your Fey Step, you can touch one willing creature within 5 feet. That creature then teleports instead of you. And this is a willing creature, so, I mean, this is just kind of a defensive-y, control-y thing that you can do to rearrange the battlefield with your allies. The main one on this one is Winter. And that does kind of go along with some of the other Frost stuff. If you happen to take Strike of the Giants Frost, this goes well with that flavor-wise. Then we are going to go into the Minotaur, because the Minotaur gets one particular ability and has some choices with some bonus actions. And this is not really a bonus action starved class or build. So you have horns. Immediately after you take the dash action on your turn and you move at least 20 feet, you can make one melee attack with your horns as a bonus action. Hammering Horn. So this is immediately after you hit a creature with a melee attack as part of your attack action on your turn. You can use a bonus action to attempt to push that target with your horns. The target must be within 5 feet, and you can push them up to 10 feet away. It's a strength saving throw. Again, that is not the most beneficial for you as the player doing it, but it is what it is. 10 feet away. Again, if you topple them and push them away, then their movement is going to be hampered massively. Now, the next species we're going to do is we're going to go down, and this is where these are. They're in these Legacy 2014. They're not really Legacy. So there are some choices with Dragonborn down here in these Legacy 2014 classes right here that come out of Fizban's treasury, and that's where I'm going. And it's the metallic dragons that come out of Fizban's that we're talking about, and they have one particular ability that is in here. It's not the gem dragons, it's not the chromatic dragons, it is the metallic dragons, and they have this metallic breath weapon that they get at 5th level called Repulsion or Enervating. Repulsion is each creature in the cone must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pushed 20 feet and be knocked prone. So if you fail with this, you can use this. Now, it is an attack action to use this. It is not a bonus action. Or you can use Enervating, which will incapacitate. So these are kind of things that can go along with a little bit with this. For the most part, I like the Goliath and I like the Frost Giant Goliath the best. All right, lastly, let's talk about some classes that go well with this. And there are some new subclasses that come in here. I don't think any of them from the Forgotten Realms book apply to these, but some are better than others. So we've got the Barbarian. Obviously, the Barbarian does get access to weapon masteries at level 1, which is great. They get Reckless Attack at level 2, which is great. Path of the Berserker is not bad at all for this. Path of the Wildheart, which used to be the totem with the bear, is also not bad if you want to build something that is very tanky. So, the next class that we're going to talk about is fighter, of course. And there's a couple of fighter choices. They're not too bad, but, you know, of course, the fighter gets access to weapon masteries right at level 1. They also get a fighting style at level 1, and we talked about some of the fighting styles that go with this. So we've got a new one. I'm doing a separate video on this called the Banneret, which is kind of like the martial class from 4E. For this one, I like the Battle Master because we have so much choice and so much versatility with it. And of course, the one we like the most with this is either maneuvering, menacing, or pushing. You can push them 5 feet, you can frighten them, or you can kind of use this to move some folks around. The tripping attack can be good if you didn't succeed on your topple. So these are all good. Champion is okay. They get your attack rolls with weapons and unarmed strikes crit on a 19 or 20. You get some other stuff. It's just okay. The best one I like for this, of course, is the Battle Master. Okay. The next and last class that we're going to talk about here is the Paladin. And of course, because we love paladins that are on horses with shields and lances, it's the classic quintessential knight. They get access to weapon masteries at first level. They do get a fighting style. They get the smite. There are some pretty good subclasses. This new subclass that came out, the Oath of the Noble Genies, gets this elemental strike, which I think is pretty awesome. So immediately after you divine smite, you can expend one of your channel divinities. You get the Tao's Crush, which grapples and restrains, which is insane. That's pretty good. And there's some extra damage and things like that. I also, always like Oath of Vengeance because we get the Vow of Enmity. So pretty good classes. So that is the video that I have for everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed, and I will catch everybody later.